The first time Isaac Fletcher saw her, she was standing outside the general store in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, with bruises on her wrists that looked like handprints, and he knew right then that some men did not deserve the women they married. It was the spring of 1883, and Isaac had been working cattle drives for the better part of 7 years, saving every penny he could scrape together. At 26 years old, he had finally bought himself a small ranch just outside town. Nothing fancy but honest land with good water. He had come into Tahlequah that morning for supplies, his wagon rattling down the muddy street, past the saloons and storefronts that made up the heart of Cherokee Nation territory. The town bustled with activity, a mixing pot of Cherokee families, white settlers, freedmen, and drifters like himself, who were looking for a fresh start in Indian territory. The woman stood very still, her hands clasped in front of her worn calico dress, her eyes fixed on the ground. She had dark auburn hair pulled back severely from a face that might have been beautiful if it was not so carefully blank. Isaac had seen that expression before on horses that had been broken too hard, that watchful emptiness that came from learning to expect pain. A man emerged from the store, tall and thick through the shoulders, with the kind of face that looked mean even when it was trying to smile. He grabbed the woman's arm without gentleness, and Isaac saw her flinch before she caught herself. The man was speaking to her in a low, angry voice, too quiet for Isaac to hear the words, but the tone carried clearly enough. The woman nodded once, twice, 3 times, her head bobbing like a puppet. Isaac found himself taking a step forward before he even realized what he was doing. His friend Tom, who had ridden into town with him, caught his arm. "Not your business, Isaac," Tom said quietly. "That is Walter Engel. He works for the timber company, and he has got a mean reputation. You do not want to get on his bad side over nothing." "That is not nothing," Isaac said. But he stayed where he was. Tom was right. A man did not interfere between a husband and wife, not in 1883, not anywhere. It was not the law exactly, but it was the way things were. A woman belonged to her husband the same way his horse or his land did, in the eyes of most folk. Walter Engel hauled the woman toward a wagon, practically threw her up onto the seat, and climbed up beside her. Isaac watched them roll away down the street, the woman sitting rigid and still, and something burned in his chest that felt like anger and helplessness mixed together. "Who is she?" he asked. Tom shrugged. "Name is Ruth, I think. Ruth Engel now. She was Ruth Edwards before she married Walter about 2 years back. Her folks died of fever, and she did not have anyone else. Walter courted her hard and fast, and she married him. Probably thought she did not have much choice." "She probably did not," Isaac said. He tried to put her out of his mind as he loaded his supplies into his wagon. He had flour and coffee and beans, nails and wire for fencing, a new axe handle to replace the one he had cracked last week. He had his own life to build, his own problems to solve. The woman with the bruises was not his concern. But that night, alone in his small ranch house with the wind howling around the eaves, he could not stop thinking about her, about the careful blankness of her face and the way she had flinched, about the handprint bruises on her wrists. Isaac saw her again 2 weeks later at the church social. Tahlequah had a small Presbyterian church that served the mixed community, and once a month they held a gathering where people brought food and visited. Isaac was not much for religion, but he went because it was a good way to meet his neighbors, and because the food was always better than anything he could cook for himself. Ruth Engel was standing near the food tables, arranging pies and cakes with precise, careful movements. She wore a high-necked dress despite the warm May weather, long sleeves buttoned to her wrists. Her hair was still pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She did not talk to anyone, just moved quietly from task to task like she was trying to be invisible. Walter was across the yard with a group of men, laughing too loud at his own jokes. He had a flask that he kept pulling from his pocket, taking long swallows when he thought the preacher was not looking. Isaac watched him the way you would watch a snake, waiting to see which way it would strike. "You should stop staring," Tom said at his elbow. "People will talk." "Let them talk," Isaac said, but he turned away. He was helping some of the men set up tables when he heard the crash. He spun around to see a plate in pieces on the ground, pie splattered across the grass. Ruth was already on her knees, trying to pick up the broken pieces, her hands shaking. Walter was standing over her, his face dark with anger. "Clumsy," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Cannot even hold a plate properly. Useless." Ruth did not say anything, just kept picking up the pieces, her head bowed. A thin line of blood appeared on her finger, where the broken ceramic had cut her. Isaac was moving before he thought about it. He crossed the yard in long strides and knelt down beside Ruth. "Here," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Let me help with that." Ruth looked up at him, startled. Her eyes were green, he noticed, a deep green like river water in summer. For just a moment, he saw something in them besides that careful blankness. Surprise, maybe. Or fear. "She can clean up her own mess," Walter said. Isaac ignored him, started gathering the larger pieces of the broken plate. "Accidents happen," he said. "No sense in anyone cutting themselves over it." "I said she can handle it." Walter's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Isaac stood up slowly, the broken pieces in his hands. He was not as thick through the shoulders as Walter, but he was an inch taller, and 7 years of hard ranch work had made him strong. He met Walter's eyes steadily. "And I am just being neighborly," he said. "That is what folks do at a church social, help each other out." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Isaac could feel his heart pounding, the adrenaline singing through his veins. He had been in his share of fights, enough to know when one was about to start. Walter's hands were clenching and unclenching at his sides, his jaw tight. Then the preacher was there, all smiles and oblivious goodwill. "Everything all right here? Oh my, what a shame about that plate. Ruth, dear, do not you worry about it one bit. These things happen. Walter, I was hoping to have a word with you about the timber contract for the new church addition." The moment broke. Walter shot Isaac one last poisonous look, then turned to follow the preacher. Isaac let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Ruth was still on her knees, very still, her cut finger dripping blood onto her dress. Isaac set down the broken pieces and offered her his hand. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let us get that finger wrapped up." She stared at his hand like she did not know what to do with it. Then, very slowly, she reached out and let him help her to her feet. Her hand was small and rough with work, and it trembled in his. Mrs. Chen, one of the Chinese women who ran a laundry in town, appeared with a clean cloth and some water. She clucked over Ruth's finger, wrapping it carefully while speaking to her in a mix of English and Cherokee that Ruth seemed to understand. Isaac stood nearby, not sure what to do with himself now. When Mrs. Chen was done, Ruth turned to Isaac. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it was the first time he had heard her speak. "You should not have. He will be. He is not happy when people interfere." "I am not afraid of Walter Engel," Isaac said. Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. "You should be," she said. Then she turned and walked away, her spine straight and her shoulders back, every line of her body radiating tension. Isaac watched her go and felt that burn in his chest again, anger and helplessness, and something else he did not want to name. The next week, Isaac had business at the timber company office. He needed to sell some trees he was clearing from his property, and the company was buying. He did not expect to see Ruth there, but when he walked into the office, there she was, scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. She looked up when the door opened, and he saw the bruise on her cheekbone, dark purple fading to yellow at the edges. She had tried to hide it with powder, but it showed through. Their eyes met for just a second, and then she ducked her head and went back to scrubbing. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, barely glanced at her. "Can I help you?" Isaac conducted his business, trying not to look at Ruth, trying not to think about the bruise on her face. When he was done, and the clerk was writing up the paperwork, he could not help himself. "Does your cleaning woman need help?" he asked. "I have got some heavy work that needs doing at my ranch, and I could use someone for a few hours." The clerk looked surprised. "You would have to ask her husband, Walter Engel. He is out on a job site today, but he will be back tomorrow." "She cannot speak for herself?" The clerk gave him a strange look. "Well, she could, but Engel would not like it. He is particular about his wife working for other men. Protective, you know." Isaac knew. That was not protection. That was ownership. He left without saying anything else, but the image of Ruth on her knees scrubbing that floor stayed with him. And the bruise on her face. 2 days later, he rode back into town with a plan that was probably foolish, but that he could not shake. He tied his horse outside the general store and went inside. The proprietor, Mr. Dalton, was a friendly man who had been helpful when Isaac was setting up his ranch. Morning, Isaac. What can I do for you? I'm looking for books, Isaac said. Reading books, novels, maybe some poetry, whatever you have got. Mr. Dalton raised his eyebrows. You starting a library? Something like that. The store did not have much. Tahlequah was not exactly a literary center, but Mr. Dalton pulled out a box from the back room. These came in a shipment last month. Nobody around here has much interest in them. I have got Robinson Crusoe, some Dickens, a collection of Longfellow's poems, and a few dime novels about the frontier. You can have the lot for $3. It was more than Isaac had planned to spend, but he counted out the money without hesitation. Mr. Dalton wrapped the books in brown paper and twine, and Isaac carried them out to his horse. The hard part was figuring out how to get them to Ruth without causing trouble. He knew if he just showed up at the Engel place, Walter would probably try to shoot him. He could leave them somewhere for her to find, but there was no guarantee Walter would not find them first. In the end, it was luck that gave him his chance. He was riding past the church the following Sunday morning when he saw Ruth walking alone down the road toward town. Walter was nowhere in sight. Isaac slowed his horse to a walk beside her. "Morning," he said. She looked up at him, startled and wary. "Good morning. Where is your husband?" "He's working. He said I should walk to church alone today." Which probably meant he was hungover or did not want to be bothered. Isaac made a decision. "I have got something for you," he said. He dismounted and pulled the package of books from his saddlebag. "Here." Ruth stared at the package like it might bite her. "What is it?" "Books for reading." She took a step back, her face going pale. "I cannot. Walter says I cannot read. He says I am too stupid for it, that I would just get ideas above my station. He does not want me wasting time on such things." Isaac held the package out to her. "What does Walter know about it? Can you read?" She hesitated, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Fear and longing, duty and desire. "I learned a little when I was a girl," she admitted finally, so quietly he had to lean in to hear her. "My mother taught me before she died, but I have not read anything in years. Walter says it is not proper for a woman. He says I should focus on keeping house and not fill my head with nonsense." "Walter says a lot of things," Isaac said. "What do you say?" Ruth looked at the package, then at Isaac, then back at the package. Slowly, like she was reaching for something forbidden, she took it from him. "I should not," she whispered. "Hide them," Isaac said. "Somewhere he will not look, and when you get a chance, when you are alone, read them." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Isaac was not sure he could explain it in a way that made sense. How do you tell someone that you saw the light going out in them, and you could not just stand by and let it happen? How do you say that you believed every person deserved something beautiful in their life, even if it was just words on a page? "Everyone should get to read if they want to," he said finally. "And you look like someone who wants to." Ruth clutched the package to her chest. Her eyes were bright, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked alive. Scared, but alive. "Thank you," she said. I will find a way." Then she turned and hurried toward the church, the package hidden under her shawl. Isaac watched her go and hoped he had not just made things worse for her. A week passed, then 2. Isaac did not see Ruth in town, and he started to worry. Had Walter found the books? Was she all right? He could not just ride up to their cabin and ask, not without causing trouble. Then one evening, just as the sun was setting, he heard a horse approaching his ranch. He stepped out onto the porch, his hand instinctively going to the rifle by the door. But it was Ruth on an old mare, riding like she had learned as a child and not forgotten. She slid down from the horse and stood in his yard, breathing hard, her hair coming loose from its pins. She was holding one of the books, Robinson Crusoe, and her face was flushed with excitement and fear and something else. "Read everyone out loud," she said breathlessly. "You said I should read them, but I need. I have been reading them to myself, hiding in the barn when Walter is away. But I need. Will you listen? Will you let me read them out loud?" Isaac came down off the porch slowly, not wanting to spook her. "Why out loud?" "Because I want to hear how the words sound. Because I want to know if I am saying them right. Because I want to share them with someone." Her voice broke a little on that last part. "I have been so alone. And these books, they are like having friends again. Like remembering what it feels like to be alive. But it is not enough just to read them to myself. I need. Please." Isaac understood then. It was not about the reading, not really. It was about having someone see her as a person, not just Walter's wife or his possession. It was about being heard. "Come inside," he said. "You can read as much as you want." She followed him into the small house, looking around at the simple furniture, the neat kitchen, the pile of work on the table. It was a bachelor's home, practical and plain, but clean. "Sit anywhere," Isaac said. He lit a lamp as the darkness gathered outside. "Can I get you some coffee? Water?" Water would be nice. He poured her a cup from the pitcher and sat down across from her at the table. Ruth opened the book, her hands shaking slightly, and found her place. Then she started to read. Her voice was hesitant at first, stumbling over some of the longer words. But as she went on, she gained confidence. She read about Robinson Crusoe's shipwreck, his struggle to survive alone on the island, his gradual creation of a life for himself in the wilderness. Isaac listened, watching her face as much as hearing the words. She was transformed. The careful blankness was gone, replaced by animation and joy. She did different voices for the characters. She gasped at the exciting parts and smiled at the clever ones. She read for an hour, maybe more, until the light outside was completely gone and the lamp was the only glow in the room. Finally, she stopped and closed the book, looking up at him with wondering eyes. "That was. I have never." "Thank you for listening," she said. "You read beautifully," Isaac said, and he meant it. "Your mother taught you well." Ruth smiled, a real smile, and it transformed her whole face. She was beautiful when she smiled, he realized. Not the fragile beauty of a china doll, but something stronger and warmer. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Walter will be home soon, and he will wonder where I am. I told him I was visiting Mrs. Chen to get help with a dress." "You can come back," Isaac said. "Anytime you want, to read." "I should not, if Walter found out. But I will. I want to." She left quickly, riding off into the night, and Isaac stood on his porch and watched her go. He knew they were playing with fire. If Walter Engel found out his wife was visiting another man's ranch alone, there would be hell to pay. But Isaac could not bring himself to regret it, not when he had seen her come alive like that, not when he had heard the joy in her voice. Ruth came back 3 days later, then again a week after that. Each time she brought one of the books and read to him for hours. They worked their way through Robinson Crusoe, then started on David Copperfield. Isaac found himself looking forward to her visits more than he wanted to admit. He started making coffee before she arrived, learned how she liked it with a little sugar. He tidied the house more carefully. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering what she was doing, if she was safe. They did not talk much at first, beyond the reading. But gradually, as the weeks passed and spring turned to early summer, they started to share pieces of themselves. She told him about her childhood, about the small farm where she had grown up, her mother who had loved books and passed that love on to her daughter, her father who had been kind but distant, who had worked himself to death, trying to make the farm profitable, her loneliness after they died, the desperation that had driven her to accept Walter's proposal. "I thought he would be kind," she said one evening. They had finished a chapter of Dickens, and she was lingering, neither of them quite ready for the evening to end. "When he was courting me, he was so attentive. He brought me flowers, said sweet things. I thought I was lucky that someone wanted me." "What changed?" Isaac asked quietly. Ruth looked down at her hands. "Nothing changed. I just saw what was really there once the courting was over. He wanted a wife the way you want a piece of furniture, something to use and arrange however you please. And when I did not, when I was not exactly what he wanted, he got angry. He hits you. It was not a question. They both knew. He says I deserve it," Ruth said, "that I provoke him, that if I was a better wife, he would not have to correct me." "That is not true," Isaac said fiercely. "Whatever he does to you, you do not deserve it. No one does." Ruth looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "Why are you so kind to me? You barely know me." "I know enough," Isaac said. "I know you are smart and brave and full of life, even though he is trying to beat it out of you. I know you deserve better than what you have got." "There is no better," Ruth said bitterly. "I am married. In the eyes of the law and the church, I belong to Walter until one of us dies. There is no divorce, no escape. This is my life now." Isaac wanted to argue, to tell her there was always a way out. But he knew she was right. Women had few options in 1883, especially married women. A woman who left her husband was shunned by society, lost any claim to property or support. She would be branded an adulteress, a fallen woman, even if her husband was the worst kind of man. "Then we will make the best of what you have," he said finally. "You can keep coming here, keep reading. It will be your escape, even if it is only for a few hours at a time." Ruth nodded, brushing away tears. "I should not come any more. It is not proper. If anyone saw me, if Walter found out." "Do you want to stop coming?" She met his eyes, and he saw the answer there before she spoke. "No," she whispered. "No, I do not want to stop." "Then do not stop. We will be careful." She nodded again and gathered up her book. But before she left, she did something she had never done before. She reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Isaac," she said, "for seeing me, for treating me like a person. You have no idea what that means to me." Then she was gone, and Isaac sat in his empty house with the ghost of her touch on his hand and the knowledge that he was falling in love with a married woman. The summer of 1883 was hot and dry, and the creek started running low. Isaac had to move his cattle to better pasture, spending long days in the saddle under the burning sun. But, no matter how tired he was, he always made sure to be home on the evenings when Ruth might come. She visited every few days, always with a book, always ready to read. They finished David Copperfield and moved on to the Longfellow poems. Ruth loved those best, he thought. She read the verses about Hiawatha and Evangeline with such feeling that Isaac sometimes forgot to listen to the words, lost in the sound of her voice. They talked more now, about everything and nothing. She asked him about his life, about the cattle drives and the places he had seen. He told her about Montana and Wyoming, about nights sleeping under the stars with nothing but his bedroll and the sound of the cattle moving in the dark, about nearly freezing in a blizzard outside of Cheyenne, about a stampede in Kansas that had killed 2 men, about deciding he had saved enough money to buy his own place and choosing Indian Territory because land was cheap and the Cherokee Nation was more welcoming to outsiders than some places. "Do you ever want to leave?" Ruth asked one evening. They were sitting on his porch, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. She had finished reading for the night, but neither of them had moved to end the visit. "Leave Tahlequah? Where would I go?" "Anywhere. Somewhere new, somewhere no one knows you." Isaac looked at her, at the wistful expression on her face. "Are you asking if I would leave, or if you would leave if you could?" Ruth was quiet for a long time. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted. "About just getting on a horse and riding away, going to California or Oregon, somewhere far from here, starting over with a new name, a new life. Why do you not? Because I am afraid, because I do not have any money of my own, because Walter would come after me and he would find me, and it would be worse than if I had never left." She hugged her knees to her chest. "And because I was taught that you do not run away from your vows, that marriage is sacred, and you endure it no matter what. Even if it kills you, I am not dead yet." But she looked so tired when she said it, so worn down. Isaac wanted to take her hand, to pull her close, and promise her that everything would be all right. But he did not have the right. She was not his. "If you ever did decide to leave," he said carefully, "you would not have to do it alone. I would help you. Money, a horse, whatever you needed." Ruth turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "Why would you do that?" "Because I love you," Isaac thought. "Because the idea of you staying with that man one more day makes me want to break something. Because you deserve to be happy, and I would give anything to be the one who makes you happy." But he could not say any of that, so instead he said, "Because you are my friend, and friends help each other." Ruth looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she stood up, brushing off her skirt. "I need to go," she said. "It is getting late." Isaac walked her to her horse, helped her mount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and he felt her breath catch. "Ruth," he said. "Do not," she said quickly. "Please do not say whatever you are about to say. I cannot. We cannot." "I know." But the air between them was charged now, electric with all the things they were not saying. Ruth looked down at him, her hand tightening on the reins. "I will see you in a few days," she said, "for the next book. I will be here." She rode away, and Isaac stood in his yard and watched her until she disappeared into the darkness. He was in dangerous territory now, and he knew it, but he could not bring himself to care. The confrontation Isaac had been half expecting came on a Saturday in late July. He was in town buying supplies when he saw Walter Engel coming out of the saloon, red-faced and obviously drunk. Walter spotted him and changed direction, heading straight toward Isaac with purpose in his stride. "You," Walter said, jabbing a finger at Isaac's chest. "I want to talk to you." Isaac set down the sack of grain he had been loading into his wagon. "All right, let us talk." "I heard something interesting the other day," Walter said, his words slightly slurred. "I heard that my wife has been seen riding out toward your ranch, alone." Isaac kept his face neutral. "I do not know what you heard, but are you calling me a liar?" Walter moved closer, and Isaac could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Because Joe Mason saw her. He was hunting out that way, and he saw Ruth riding toward your place. So I will ask you straight. Is my wife visiting you?" A small crowd was gathering, people stopping to watch the confrontation. Isaac knew that whatever he said next would be all over town by nightfall. "Mrs. Engel has stopped by a few times," he said carefully. "I loaned her some books." "Books." Walter said the word like it was something dirty. "I told her she was not to waste her time with reading. I told her it was not proper. Reading is not improper, it is just reading." "You do not get to decide what is proper for my wife," Walter snarled. "She is mine, you understand? Mine. And if I find out you have been, if you have laid one finger on her—" "I have not touched her," Isaac said, which was technically true. He had helped her on and off her horse, had briefly touched her hand once or twice, but nothing more. Nothing inappropriate, even if his feelings were. "You better not have, because if I find out you have been messing with what is mine, I will kill you. You understand me? I will put a bullet in you and claim self-defense, and there is not a court in Oklahoma that would convict me." "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise." Walter leaned in close. "Stay away from Ruth. She does not want your books or your attention. She has a husband to take care of her." Isaac looked at Walter, at the mean little eyes and the cruel set of his mouth, and felt his temper rising. "Does she? Because from what I have seen, you do not take care of her. You hurt her." Walter's face went purple. "What I do with my own wife is none of your business." "It is my business when I see bruises on her face. Maybe she needs bruises to learn her place. Maybe if more wives got the back of a hand when they needed it, there would be fewer problems in this world." Isaac's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to hit Walter, to knock that smug expression off his face. But he knew that was what Walter wanted. A fight would give Walter an excuse, a reason to escalate things. "You are pathetic," Isaac said quietly. "Any man who has to hit a woman to feel strong is not a man at all. He is a coward." Walter swung at him. Isaac had been expecting it, was already moving. The punch glanced off his shoulder instead of connecting with his jaw. He grabbed Walter's arm and twisted, using the other man's momentum to send him stumbling. Walter crashed into the side of Isaac's wagon and went down hard. For a moment, Isaac thought that would be the end of it. But Walter pushed himself up, his hand going to his belt, and Isaac saw the knife. "Stop this!" The shout came from Sheriff Parker, who pushed through the crowd with his hand on his pistol. "Walter, you put that knife away right now, or I will lock you up." Walter hesitated, his face contorted with rage. Then slowly he slid the knife back into its sheath. "This is not over," he said to Isaac. "You stay away from my wife." The sheriff looked between them. "Both of you, calm down. Walter, go sleep off that whiskey. Isaac, finish your shopping and head home. I do not want to see either of you causing trouble in my town." Walter stalked off, and the crowd dispersed, disappointed that there had not been more of a fight. Sheriff Parker pulled Isaac aside. "What was that about?" he asked. Isaac explained briefly, leaving out the parts about his feelings for Ruth. The sheriff listened, his expression troubled. "I cannot tell you to stop loaning books to Mrs. Engel," he said finally. "That would be ridiculous. But Isaac, I am going to give you some advice as a friend. Walter Engel is a dangerous man, especially when he is drinking, and he is drinking more and more these days. If he thinks you are moving in on his wife, he will do something stupid, something violent. I am not moving in on anyone. But you care about her. I can see it in your face, and that is almost as dangerous. Sheriff Parker sighed. Look, I know Walter knocks Ruth around. Half the town knows. But there is nothing I can do about it. A man and his wife, that is private business. The law does not get involved unless someone ends up dead. That is a terrible law. I am not disagreeing with you. I am just telling you how things are. So, be careful. And maybe tell Mrs. Engel to be careful too. Walter is watching her now. If he catches her doing anything he does not like, it will not go well for her. Isaac thanked the sheriff and finished loading his wagon, his mind racing. He needed to warn Ruth, but he had no way to reach her. He could not go to her house, not without making things worse. All he could do was hope she would come to him, and soon. She came that night, riding hard through the darkness. Isaac heard the horse and ran out to meet her. Ruth practically fell off the mare, and he caught her, and he saw the fresh bruises on her throat, marks like fingers. "He knows," she gasped. "He knows I have been coming here. He said if I ever come back, he will kill you. He said he will kill both of us." Isaac helped her into the house, his rage at Walter burning hot and fierce. "What did he do to you?" "It does not matter. I cannot come back here, Isaac. I cannot put you in danger." "I do not care about the danger." "Well, I do." Ruth was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "I will not have your death on my conscience. I will not be the reason you get hurt." Isaac took her hands, held them tightly. "Ruth, listen to me. You cannot go back to him. Not after this. He is going to kill you." "He will not. He just gets angry sometimes. If I am more careful, if I do what he says." "That is not how this works, and you know it. Men like Walter do not stop. They just get worse." Ruth pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. "What choice do I have? I am his wife. I have nowhere else to go. No money, no family. If I leave him, I will be a pariah. No one will help me." "I will help you." The words hung in the air between them. Ruth looked at him, her eyes red from crying. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Isaac knew he should not say it, knew that speaking the truth would change everything, make it impossible to go back. But he could not hold it in anymore. "Because I love you," he said. "I have been in love with you since the first time I heard you read. Maybe even before that." Ruth stared at him, and he saw 1,000 emotions cross her face. Shock, fear, hope, longing. "You should not love me," she whispered. "I am married. It is wrong." "What is wrong is you being trapped with a man who hurts you. What is wrong is a world that says you have to stay with him no matter what he does." "Even if I wanted to leave, even if I could, where would I go? What would I do?" Isaac had been thinking about this, planning for it, even though he had not let himself fully acknowledge what he was planning. "You could go to California," he said. "I have money saved, enough for a ticket west, and enough to get you started somewhere new. You could say you are a widow, make up a story, start over. You would give up your savings for me? I would give up everything for you." Ruth was crying in earnest now, big gulping sobs that shook her whole body. Isaac pulled her close, and she did not resist. She buried her face in his chest and cried, and he held her and stroked her hair and felt his heart breaking for her. "I am so tired," she said finally, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I am so tired of being afraid, of walking on eggshells, of trying to be perfect so he will not hit me. I do not want to live like this anymore." "Then do not. Leave with me, tonight. We can pack what you need and be gone before dawn." Ruth pulled back, looking up at him with tear-stained face. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere you want. California, Oregon, maybe Montana. Somewhere far from here where Walter cannot find you." "And what about you? You have a ranch here, a life. I cannot ask you to give that up." "You are not asking. I am offering." Isaac cupped her face in his hands, gently, so gently. "Ruth, I do not care about the ranch. I do not care about any of it if it means I have to watch you suffer. Come with me, please." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "All right. Let us go." They worked quickly, gathering supplies. Isaac packed food, blankets, ammunition for his rifle. He gathered all his money from its hiding place under a floorboard, a small leather pouch heavy with coins and bills. Nearly $1,000, 7 years of careful saving. It was enough to get them far from Tahlequah and set them up somewhere new. Ruth had almost nothing to pack, just the books and the clothes on her back. Everything else she owned was at the cabin she shared with Walter, and she refused to go back there. "I do not need anything from that place," she said. "Everything there just reminds me of being his." "What about the horse?" Ruth looked at the old mare, and her expression softened. "Willow. Her name is Willow. She was mine before I married Walter, the only thing of my own I had left. He will be furious when he realizes she is gone." "Let him be furious," Isaac said. "We will be long gone by then." They left in the dead of night, Isaac on his stallion and Ruth on Willow, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. The moon was nearly full, giving them enough light to see by as they picked their way through the countryside. Isaac headed northwest, away from the main roads. They would circle around Tahlequah and head for Kansas, then west to Colorado and beyond. They rode through the night, barely speaking, all their energy focused on putting distance between themselves and Oklahoma. When dawn broke, painting the sky pink and gold, they were 20 miles from Tahlequah, deep in rolling prairie country. Isaac called a halt in a small grove of cottonwoods near a creek. "We should rest here for a few hours. The horses need water and grazing." Ruth dismounted stiffly, and Isaac could see how exhausted she was. She had probably not slept at all the night before, too terrified of what Walter might do. "Here," he said, spreading a blanket under one of the trees. "Lie down. I will keep watch." "You need rest too." "I will rest later. Right now, you need it more." Ruth was too tired to argue. She lay down on the blanket, and within minutes, she was asleep. Isaac sat with his back against a tree trunk, his rifle across his lap, and watched her sleep. She looked younger like this, the lines of worry smoothed from her face. He thought about what they had done, running away together. In the eyes of the law and society, they were criminals now. He had helped a married woman leave her husband. Ruth was technically committing adultery just by being with him, even though they had not so much as kissed. But Isaac could not bring himself to regret it. Whatever they were doing, it was right. He knew that deep in his bones. Ruth slept for 4 hours while Isaac kept watch and the horses grazed. When she woke, the sun was high and hot. She sat up, blinking in the bright light. "Where are we?" "About 25 miles northwest of Tahlequah, I reckon. We are making good time." Ruth rubbed her face, then looked at him. "Isaac, what have we done? We have given you a chance at a new life. But you left everything behind, your ranch, your friends. And I would do it again in a heartbeat." He moved to sit beside her on the blanket. "Ruth, I meant what I said last night. I love you, and I know you were scared. I know you have been through hell. I am not asking for anything from you right now, except to let me help you get somewhere safe. After that, if you want to go your own way, I will understand. But I had to get you away from Walter." Ruth looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. It was a simple band, cheap metal that had already started to tarnish. "I do not love Walter," she said quietly. "I do not think I ever did. I married him because I was desperate and alone, and he seemed like a solution. But I have felt more alive in the hours I spent reading to you than I did in the entire 2 years of my marriage." She pulled off the ring and looked at it for a long moment. Then she threw it as hard as she could. It disappeared into the tall grass, lost forever. "I do not know if I can love anyone right now," she continued. I feel broken, like Walter took everything that was good in me and crushed it." "You are not broken," Isaac said fiercely. "You are strong and brave, and you survived. Do not let him take that from you." Ruth turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes again. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness. You deserve to be loved and treasured and treated with respect. You deserve everything that Walter never gave you." She reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid that I will never be able to, that he damaged me too much. Then we will take it slow. We have all the time in the world." They sat there in the shade of the cottonwoods, holding hands while the creek burbled nearby and the horses dozed in the sun. It was a small moment, quiet and simple, but Isaac thought it might be the happiest he had ever been. They rode on through Kansas, taking back roads and avoiding towns as much as possible. Isaac knew Walter would come after them, or at least send someone. A man like Walter would not let his wife go without a fight, especially not after she had run off with another man. Every time they saw other riders in the distance, Isaac's hand went to his rifle, but days passed, and no one came after them. They camped under the stars, Isaac always making sure to give Ruth her own space, her own blanket on the opposite side of the fire. He was careful not to crowd her, not to make her uncomfortable. At night, she read to him by firelight, working through the books they had brought. Her voice became his favorite sound, better than music. They talked more as they rode, sharing pieces of themselves. Ruth told him about her mother, about learning to read by candlelight, and the feel of her mother's hands braiding her hair. She told him about the dreams she had when she was young, of becoming a teacher or traveling to see the ocean. Dreams that had died when her parents died, and she found herself alone and penniless. Isaac told her about his family, about growing up poor in Missouri with 5 siblings, about his father, who drank too much, and his mother, who worked herself into an early grave, about leaving home at 17 to make his own way in the world, determined not to end up like his father, about the freedom he had found in the open spaces, the satisfaction of hard work and self-reliance. "Do you ever want to go back?" Ruth asked one evening as they made camp in Colorado, the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance. "To Missouri? No, there is nothing for me there. My mother is dead, my father probably is too by now. My siblings scattered to the winds. I do not even know where most of them are. Do you miss having family?" Isaac looked at her across the fire. "Sometimes, but family is not just about blood. It is about the people you choose, the people who matter to you." Ruth smiled, a small, sad smile. "I like that idea, that we can make our own families." They pushed on into the mountains, following trails that Isaac remembered from his cattle driving days. The air got thinner and cooler as they climbed, and Ruth marveled at the towering peaks, the deep green of the pine forests. She had never been more than 20 miles from Tahlequah in her whole life, and every new sight was a wonder. "It is so beautiful," she said, staring up at a mountain peak dusted with snow even in summer. "I never imagined the world was this big, this beautiful." "There is so much more to see," Isaac said. "The Pacific Ocean, the redwood forests, the California valleys. We will see it all if you want." "I want everything," Ruth said, and there was a fierceness in her voice that Isaac loved. "I want to see everything, do everything I was never allowed to do. I want to learn to shoot a gun, to swim in a river, to dance. I want to taste wine and ride a train and stand on a mountaintop and scream at the top of my lungs. I want to live, Isaac, really live." "Then that is what we will do," Isaac promised. They came down from the mountains into the broad valleys of western Colorado. The land here was still wild, dotted with small ranching communities and mining camps. They stopped in a town called Glenwood Springs to resupply and give the horses a rest. It was in Glenwood Springs that they had their first real scare. They were in the general store, Ruth looking at fabric while Isaac paid for supplies, when a man's voice cut through the store. "Ruth Edwards, is that you?" Ruth went pale. Isaac turned to see a middle-aged man in a prospector's gear, staring at Ruth with recognition. "I am sorry," Ruth said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Ruth Fletcher." The man frowned. "Could have sworn you were Ruth Edwards from down Oklahoma way. You look just like her." "I get that sometimes," Ruth said. "I must have one of those faces." The prospector shrugged and wandered off, but Isaac could see Ruth shaking. They gathered their supplies quickly and left town. "Fletcher?" Isaac asked once they were safely back on the trail. Ruth looked embarrassed. "It just came out. I am sorry. I should not have used your name without asking. I am not upset. I am just. Are you saying you want people to think we are married?" "It would be easier," Ruth said. "A single woman traveling alone with a man, people talk. But if they think I am your wife, it is respectable. You are still married to Walter, in the eyes of the law." "I do not care about the law. In my heart, I stopped being Walter's wife the moment I left with you." She met his eyes. "If you do not want people to think we are married, I understand. But, Isaac, I am tired of hiding. I am tired of being ashamed. I want to start over, and that means leaving Ruth Engel behind. I want to be Ruth Fletcher, if you will have me." Isaac felt something swell in his chest, huge and warm. "Of course I will have you. But Ruth, I do not want you to feel pressured. I meant what I said. I will wait as long as you need. I know you will. That is why I trust you." They rode on, and from that day forward, they introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher. It felt strange at first, like playing pretend. But It also felt right. They stayed in small hotels in the towns they passed through, always getting 2 rooms, even though people assumed they were sharing one. Isaac knew Ruth was not ready for that, might not be ready for a long time, but he was patient. He would wait forever if that was what she needed. August turned to September as they made their way across Utah. The desert landscape was harsh and beautiful, all red rocks and endless sky. They traveled with a small wagon train for part of the journey, other families heading west for new opportunities. The women took to Ruth immediately, teaching her to bake Dutch oven bread and helping her sew a new dress from fabric she had bought in Glenwood Springs. The men respected Isaac for his obvious skill with horses and his steady temperament. No one questioned their story that they were newly married and heading to California to start a ranch. It was a common enough tale. One evening, sitting around the communal campfire with the other travelers, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson asked Ruth how they met. Ruth did not hesitate. "He saved me," she said simply. "I was in a bad situation, and Isaac gave me a way out. He is the kindest man I have ever known." The women made approving noises, and Mrs. Patterson patted Ruth's hand. "You hold on to him, dear. Good men are rare." "I know," Ruth said, and she looked at Isaac across the fire with such warmth that he felt his heart skip. That night, after everyone had gone to their tents and wagons, Ruth came to find Isaac. He was on watch, sitting by the dying fire and watching the stars. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. "I wanted to talk to you." She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Isaac, I have been thinking about us, about what we are doing. All right. When I married Walter, I did not have a choice. Not really. I was alone and desperate, and he seemed like my only option. I said the vows, but I did not mean them. I was just trying to survive." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But with you, it is different. I choose you. Every day I choose you. I choose the way you treat me with respect, the way you listen when I talk, the way you have been patient with me. I choose the life we are building together." Isaac did not dare move, barely breathed. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want to just pretend anymore. I know we cannot get legally married, not while Walter is alive, and I am technically still his wife. But in every way that matters, Isaac, I want to be yours, and I want you to be mine. Ruth." He turned to her, took her hands. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything. I do not feel like I owe you. I feel like I love you." The words came out in a rush, like she had been holding them back for too long. "I love you, Isaac Fletcher. I love your kindness and your strength, and the way you see me as a whole person, not just a possession. I love the way you read with me and the way you look at me like I am something precious. I love you, and I want to be with you, really be with you." Isaac felt like his heart might burst. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I love you too," he said, "more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Then he kissed her, soft and gentle, giving her every chance to pull away. But she did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and kissed him back with a fierce intensity that took his breath away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ruth was smiling. It was the first truly happy smile Isaac had ever seen on her face, bright and unguarded. "So, we are doing this?" she asked. "We are really doing this?" "We are really doing this, you and me together, for as long as you will have me." "Forever then," Ruth said. "I want forever." They held each other by the dying fire, and Isaac felt like his life was finally starting. Everything before this moment had just been preparation, just waiting for Ruth to come into his life and show him what it meant to truly love someone. They reached California in October, the mountains giving way to the lush valleys and coastal hills. They settled in a small town called Paso Robles in the central part of the state, where land was still relatively cheap and the climate was mild year-round. Isaac used most of his remaining money to buy a small ranch with good water and fertile soil. It was not much, just a cabin and a barn and 50 acres, but it was theirs. They worked side by side to build their new life. Isaac repaired fences and worked with the handful of cattle he bought at auction. Ruth planted a garden, learning from the other women in town how to grow vegetables in the California soil. They made friends slowly, being careful with their story, but finding that most people in California did not ask too many questions. The West was full of people running from something, starting over. Isaac and Ruth fit right in. On a cool November evening, just as the sun was setting over the hills, Isaac came in from working to find Ruth in the kitchen, wearing the new dress she had made and with her hair down around her shoulders. She had set the table with wildflowers and what looked like a special meal. "What is this?" he asked. "It is our anniversary," Ruth said. 3 months since we left Oklahoma. 3 months of our new life. Isaac pulled her into his arms, kissed the top of her head. "Best 3 months of my life." "Mine too. But Isaac, I want to ask you something." "Anything." Ruth pulled back to look up at him. "I want us to get married, really married, not just pretending. I know we cannot do it legally, not yet, but I want to stand up in front of God and whoever else and make real vows to you. Vows I choose, vows I mean." Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. I want to make it official in every way we can." They found a minister in a neighboring town who was willing to perform a ceremony without asking too many questions about Ruth's legal status. Isaac suspected the man knew they were in an irregular situation, but he was kind and did not press for details. On a bright Sunday morning in December 1883, Isaac Fletcher and Ruth Edwards stood before that minister in a small chapel and spoke their vows to each other. Ruth wore her best dress and carried a bouquet of late-blooming roses from their garden. Isaac wore his only suit, brushed clean and pressed. There were no guests except the minister's wife and a neighboring rancher who served as a witness. But it did not matter. What mattered was the way Ruth looked at Isaac as she promised to love and cherish him. What mattered was the steadiness in Isaac's voice as he vowed to protect and honor her all his days. What mattered was the rings they exchanged, simple gold bands that Isaac had bought from a jeweler in town, and the way Ruth cried happy tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Ruth like it was the first time, full of promise and hope and love, and Ruth kissed him back like she was finally truly free. Their wedding night was tender and careful, Isaac treating Ruth like she was made of glass. He had waited so long, been so patient, and he was determined that every moment would be about her comfort and her pleasure. Ruth was nervous, he could tell, memories of Walter and his rough, selfish ways still haunting her. But Isaac took his time, showed her with every touch and kiss that this was different, that he loved her, that he saw her, that her happiness mattered more to him than anything else. Afterward, lying together in their bed, Ruth cried, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I did not know it could be like that," she whispered. "I thought. With Walter it was always. He never cared if I was ready, if I wanted to. It was just something he took." Isaac held her close, anger at Walter burning in his chest all over again. But he pushed it down. Walter did not get to have space in their bed, in their happiness. "With us, it will always be about both of us," he promised. "Your wants and needs matter just as much as mine. Maybe more." "Not more," Ruth said. "Equal. We are equals, partners. That is what I want us to be. Then that is what we will be." Their first year in California was hard work, but good. Isaac built up the ranch slowly, buying more cattle as they could afford them. Ruth proved to have a knack for business, keeping careful records of their expenses and income. She also started teaching reading to some of the children in town whose parents could not afford proper schooling. It gave her joy, Isaac could see, to pass on the love of reading that her mother had given her. They made friends with their neighbors, the Coopers and the Martins and the Chen family, who had come from San Francisco to start a farm. They went to church socials and helped with barn raisings and became part of the community. No one questioned Ruth's past, and slowly, the fear that Walter would find them began to fade. But the past has a way of catching up with you. It was a hot day in July 1884, nearly a year since they had left Oklahoma, when a stranger rode up to the ranch. Isaac was out mending a fence line, and Ruth was in the garden. The stranger was a hard-looking man, with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. "Afternoon," the stranger said. "I am looking for a woman named Ruth Engel. Word is she might be in these parts." Ruth froze, her heart pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "I am sorry. I do not know anyone by that name." The deputy looked at her closely. "You sure about that? Because you match the description I was given. Auburn hair, green eyes, about 5.5 feet tall. Wanted for running out on her lawful husband back in Oklahoma." My name is Ruth Fletcher, Ruth said, and I am married to Isaac Fletcher. We have been here nearly a year. You got proof of that? Marriage certificate? Ruth's mind raced. They had the certificate from the California ceremony, but it would not stand up to scrutiny if someone looked into it closely. Before she could answer, Isaac appeared, drawn by the sound of voices. "Can I help you?" he asked, moving to stand beside Ruth. The deputy explained again. Isaac listened, his face carefully neutral. "Like my wife said, her name is Ruth Fletcher. Has been since we married back in November." "And before that?" "Before that is her business." The deputy pulled out a folded paper. "I have a warrant here for the arrest of Ruth Engel, wanted for abandoning her husband and stealing his property, specifically one horse." "That horse was mine," Ruth said hotly. "I had her before I married Walter Engel." "So you admit you are Ruth Engel?" Ruth realized her mistake too late. Isaac squeezed her hand, a warning. "My wife is Ruth Fletcher," Isaac said firmly. "Whatever happened in Oklahoma, it does not concern us. Now, if you do not have a warrant with the name Ruth Fletcher on it, I suggest you leave our property." The deputy looked between them, clearly frustrated. "Mr. Engel paid me good money to track down his runaway wife. He wants her back." "I am not going back," Ruth said. "I would rather die than go back to that man. That is not your choice to make. You are his legal wife." "She is my legal wife," Isaac said. "We have a marriage certificate to prove it." "You cannot marry someone who is already married. That is bigamy. Prove she was married before. Prove she is this Ruth Engel you were looking for." The standoff stretched on. Finally, the deputy shook his head. "I will be back," he warned, "with a real sheriff and proper papers. And when I come back, Mrs. Engel, you will be going home to Oklahoma, whether you want to or not." He rode off, leaving Isaac and Ruth standing in the yard, holding on to each other. "What are we going to do?" Ruth asked, trying not to panic. "He will be back, Isaac. He will bring more men, and they will take me back." "No one is taking you anywhere," Isaac said fiercely. "I will die before I let that happen." But they both knew that might not be enough. The law was on Walter's side. As Ruth's legal husband, he had every right to reclaim her. The marriage ceremony in California would not hold up if someone challenged it, not when Ruth had a living husband in Oklahoma. That night, they sat up late, trying to figure out what to do. They could run again, but where would they go? How long could they keep running? "There has to be another way," Ruth said. "Some legal way to end my marriage to Walter. Divorce is nearly impossible, and it takes years. We do not have years. What if? What if Walter was dead?" Isaac looked at her sharply. "What are you saying?" "I am not saying we should kill him. I am just. If he was dead, I would be a widow, free to remarry legally. But he is not dead, as far as we know, and we cannot just make him dead." Ruth slumped in her chair, defeated. "Then what do we do?" Before Isaac could answer, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. It was late, past 10 at night. No one should be calling at this hour. Isaac grabbed his rifle and went to the door. "Who is it?" "Cooper, from next door." "Isaac, open up. I need to talk to you." Isaac opened the door to find his neighbor, Frank Cooper, looking serious. "That deputy who was here today, he is staying at the hotel in town. He has been drinking and talking, telling anyone who will listen about the runaway wife he is going to collect. It is all over town." Isaac cursed under his breath. "That is not good." "No, it is not. But that is not why I am here. Isaac, Sarah, and I have been talking. We know you and Ruth are good people. We do not care what happened before you came to California. What matters is who you are now, and we want to help." "How?" Frank pulled an envelope from his pocket. "My brother is a lawyer in San Francisco. I sent him a telegram today explaining the situation. He sent this back." He handed the envelope to Isaac. "He says there might be a way, if Ruth is willing to testify about the abuse. It is a long shot. But California is more progressive than Oklahoma. The courts here have granted divorces in cases of extreme cruelty." Ruth had come to stand beside Isaac. "But I am not a resident of California. I am still technically a resident of Oklahoma." "That is where it gets tricky," Frank admitted. "You would need to establish residency here, and that takes time, usually at least a year. But Isaac, you have been here nearly a year already. If Ruth came here as Ruth Edwards as a single woman and you married her a few months later, well, there is no record in California of a Ruth Engel, is there?" Isaac saw what Frank was getting at. "Are you suggesting we lie?" I am suggesting that sometimes the law is not just, and sometimes good people have to work around it to do what is right. Ruth, if you swear that you came to California as a single woman, that you married Isaac here, who is to say otherwise? That deputy does not have any proof beyond Walter Engel's word. Ruth looked at Isaac, hope dawning in her eyes. Could that work? It is risky, Frank warned. If they prove you are lying, you could both be arrested. But if you can convince the court that you have been Ruth Fletcher all along, that this Walter Engel is either confused or lying, well, then there is no case. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one they had. Over the next few days, they worked with Frank and his lawyer brother to build their case. They gathered testimonies from neighbors who would swear they had known Ruth as Ruth Fletcher for the past year. They produced receipts and documents with Ruth's new name on them. They built a life on paper that said Ruth Edwards had come to California, met Isaac Fletcher, and married him in a small ceremony with few witnesses. When the deputy came back a week later with a federal marshal, Isaac and Ruth were ready. They produced their marriage certificate, their witnesses, their documentation. They stuck to their story. Ruth had never been to Oklahoma, had never married Walter Engel. The man was clearly confused or lying. The deputy was furious, but the federal marshal was more reasonable. He looked at the evidence, talked to the witnesses, and finally shook his head. "I do not have enough here to make an arrest," he said. "If Mr. Engel wants to pursue this, he will need to come to California himself and make his case. But based on what I am seeing, Mrs. Fletcher has established her identity here." The deputy wanted to argue, but the marshal cut him off. "That is my decision. We are going back to Oklahoma, and we are going to tell Mr. Engel that his wife is either dead or was never here to begin with." After they left, Isaac and Ruth collapsed in relief. They had won, at least for now. But they both knew it might not be over. If Walter was determined enough, if he had enough money, he could still come after them. But months passed, and no one came. 1. A year went by, then 2. Slowly the fear faded. They learned later, through a letter from Tom in Oklahoma, that Walter Engel had died in a timber accident in the fall of 1885. He had been drunk on the job, and a tree had fallen on him. It was a quick death, Tom wrote, probably more merciful than he deserved. When Ruth read the letter, she felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, a guilty sort of joy that she was finally, truly free, but also sadness for the waste of it all, for the man Walter might have been if he had been different. "I am sorry he is dead," she said to Isaac. "Not for me, but for him. He could have had a good life if he had not been so angry, so cruel. What a waste." "You have too generous a heart," Isaac said, pulling her close. "But that is one of the reasons I love you. With Walter dead, Ruth was legally a widow. She could remarry Isaac properly with no fear. But they decided not to. The ceremony they had performed in that little chapel was real enough for them. They did not need the law's blessing. Life went on. The ranch prospered. Isaac bought more land, more cattle. Ruth's reading lessons grew into a proper school, held in their barn every weekday. The territory paid her a small salary to teach, and it gave her deep satisfaction. In the spring of 1886, Ruth discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, memories of Walter making her fear what motherhood might mean. But Isaac was patient and loving, helping her work through her fears. When their son was born in December 1886, a healthy baby boy with Isaac's dark hair and Ruth's green eyes, they named him James, after Ruth's father. Holding James for the first time, Ruth cried. "I did not think I could have this," she said. "I thought Walter had broken something in me, that I would never be able to be a mother." "You were always going to be an amazing mother," Isaac said, kissing her forehead. "You just needed the chance." They had 2 more children in the years that followed, a daughter named Alice in 1888, and another son named Thomas in 1890. The house rang with laughter and noise, with the sound of children playing and Ruth reading to them every night before bed, just as her mother had read to her. The ranch grew into something substantial. By 1895, Isaac employed 3 ranch hands and owned 200 head of cattle. Ruth's school had moved into a proper building in town, and she had 2 assistant teachers. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On their 12th anniversary, in December 1895, Isaac took Ruth up into the hills above their ranch. It was a clear, cold day, and from the hilltop, they could see their whole property spread out below them. The house, the barn, the corrals and pastures. the orchards Ruth had planted, the creek winding through the valley. "Look at what we built," Isaac said, his arm around her waist. "All of this, from nothing, from running and fear and desperation. We built something beautiful." Ruth leaned into him, watching their children playing in the yard far below. James was 12 now, tall and gangly. Alice was 7, all energy and questions. Thomas was 5, still small enough to need his mother's hand. "We did we not?" she said wonderingly. "We made a life, a real life, with love and joy and hope. Do you ever regret it? Leaving Oklahoma, running away with me?" Ruth turned to face him, taking his face in her hands. "Not for one single second. You gave me my life back, Isaac. You showed me what love really means. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I could want. You gave me everything too," Isaac said. "I was just existing before I met you, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live, to love someone more than myself. You made me better." They kissed there on the hilltop, the California sun warm on their faces, while their children played and their life spread out below them. It had been 12 years since that day in Tahlequah, when Isaac had first seen Ruth and known that some men did not deserve the women they married. 12 years since he had bought her books and told her to read. 12 years since she had shown up at his door, asking to read out loud, and he had fallen in love with the sound of her voice. It had not been an easy road. They had faced danger and fear, had run from the law, and built a life on determination and love. But every hard moment had been worth it for this, for a life filled with love and laughter, for children who grew up knowing they were treasured, for the quiet joy of sitting on a porch together, watching the sunset, and knowing you were exactly where you belonged. Isaac and Ruth Fletcher grew old together on that California ranch. They watched their children grow up and have children of their own. James became a lawyer in San Francisco, fighting for workers' rights and fair treatment under the law. Alice became a teacher like her mother, opening schools throughout Central California. Thomas took over the ranch, running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. Ruth kept teaching well into her 60s, passing on her love of reading to generation after generation of children. Some of her former students became teachers themselves, spreading literacy and education throughout the growing state of California. She wrote several children's books late in her life, simple stories about brave girls and kind boys, about the importance of education and the power of words. They were published by a small San Francisco press and became beloved throughout the West. Isaac remained active on the ranch until his 70s, though he eventually turned most of the daily operations over to Thomas. He served on the town council for 20 years and was instrumental in bringing a proper school, library, and hospital to Paso Robles. People remembered him as a fair man, quiet but strong, who always stood up for those who could not stand up for themselves. On a warm evening in May 1920, Isaac and Ruth sat together on the porch of their ranch house, the same porch they had sat on thousands of times before. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard years and good living. But their love for each other had only grown deeper with time. Ruth was reading to him, as she had done so many times over the years. They were rereading David Copperfield, the book they had shared in those early days when everything was new and frightening and full of possibility. When she finished the chapter, Ruth closed the book and looked at Isaac. "Do you remember the first time I read to you? In your little ranch house in Oklahoma? I remember everything about you," Isaac said, taking her hand. "Every moment, from the first time I saw you to right now. We have had a good life, have we not? The best life. The only life I ever wanted." Ruth leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in the gathering dusk, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter floating on the evening air. "Thank you," Ruth said quietly, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me books when I was not allowed to read, for showing me that love does not have to hurt, for giving me a life worth living." "Thank you for being brave enough to leave," Isaac replied, "for reading out loud to me, for choosing me, choosing us, even when it was hard, for loving me back." They sat there as the stars came out, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful together. The cowboy who had bought books and the woman who had read them out loud, proving that sometimes the greatest acts of rebellion are also the greatest acts of love. Their story would be passed down through generations of their family, a reminder that love can triumph over cruelty. that courage can overcome fear, that it is never too late to start over and build the life you deserve. And in the little town of Paso Robles, California, there stands to this day a public library named for Ruth Fletcher, a woman who believed that words have power and that everyone deserves the freedom to read, to learn, to choose their own path. Isaac and Ruth both lived into their 80s, dying within months of each other in 1925, their hands clasped together until the very end. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that read, Isaac Fletcher, beloved husband and father, and Ruth Fletcher, beloved wife and mother. But those who knew them added a third marker, a bench between the graves with a plaque that read, Here lie two people who showed us what love really means. May their story live on forever. And it did. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren told the story of Ruth and Isaac, of books and bravery, of a love that refused to be broken. It became a family legend, passed down through the years, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories start with the simplest acts of kindness and grow into something that changes not just two lives, but generations to come. The books Ruth had read out loud to Isaac, those worn volumes that had started everything, were preserved by the family and eventually donated to the library that bore her name. Visitors can still see them today, Robinson Crusoe and David Copperfield, and the collection of Longfellow poems, their pages yellowed and fragile with age, but the words still as powerful as they were that first night when a frightened woman asked a cowboy if she could read to him, and he said yes. And in saying yes, in buying those books and encouraging her to read every one out loud, Isaac Fletcher had given Ruth more than just stories. He had given her back herself. He had given her freedom and love and a future she had never dared to dream of. And in return, Ruth had given him everything, her heart, her trust, her devotion, and a lifetime of love that never wavered. Their story ended not in tragedy, but in triumph. They lived long, full lives surrounded by children and grandchildren who grew up knowing they were loved. They built something lasting, not just in the ranch and the school and the library, but in the example they set of what love should be, respectful, equal, kind, patient, enduring. And so, the story of Isaac Fletcher and Ruth came to its close, not with an ending, but with a beginning that continued long after they were gone. Because the best love stories do not really end. They echo forward through time, touching lives, inspiring others, proving that love is the most powerful force in the world, and that sometimes, in the darkest moments, all it takes is one person brave enough to say, I see you, and another person brave enough to believe them. From that first meeting in Tahlequah, Oklahoma in 1883 to their final days together in California in 1925, Isaac and Ruth Fletcher lived a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative magic of a simple act, reading out loud to someone you love.